Got it. I'm looking for a doorway. I'm looking for a way to make an entrance into my own way of storytelling. Um, because I mean, I can tell other people's stories, but I'd like to be able to begin to tell my own.
Great. Beautiful. Yes, Elizabeth.
I I understand that magical space that you can enter when you are entering the magic of being a storyteller. And I have experienced a story that I didn't know. I never that it would come through. So I'm interested in some of it maybe from my childhood, but that that a sacred space that you can enter in this magical time, and that allowing for it to become in that moment, and it's maybe never to be told again, but that sort of um, offering space, you know.
I hear that as like being in that creative life force flow.
Mhm.
Um, and sorry, I wish I could show you what's happening right now. Mike, I think I'm going to have to show you what's happening right now. Oh, I can't. My cat has decided to jump onto. I've never seen him do this. He's jumping onto the wall and trying to like, like pop off all these these feathered faces that I have from these Inuit masks. So
Oh no.
I've never seen this happen before. But what I'm hearing you say is that you're you're talking about being in that very alive flow when the creative life force is coming through you, and that
Mhm.
the story is, I always say it's like we're being storied every,
Mhm.
like our life is a story, whether or not we're aware of it or can influence the channel. It kind of goes back to like this idea of fate and destiny, and that they say destiny, like our stars have been charted, but what we do with the journey is up to us, and so I think of that as the same thing with your, that creative life flow. It's like it's happening to all of us, but then that when there's that moment when we can open to be really conscious about that creative life force is flowing through us, and then to assemble ourselves in such a way so that we can actually go on the ride you know.
Mhm.
Um, okay.
Crossing over into the golden circle.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm.
I've never heard that expressed in that way. But yeah. Okay. I'm hearing Loki over here. Loki saying, beaming in from the island of Hawaii. Sacred storytelling for me is the caring, the wisdom we all need in story. Yeah. Yeah. I just heard Richard Rudd said the other day. Guys, I'm just like, I'm already just going wildly off. I have a script that I use for this. And apparently I just don't like it. But he said, wisdom is the living spirit of truth. I'd never heard wisdom expressed in that way. Wisdom is the living spirit of truth. So it's that idea of right, like how do we allow the wisdom of our stories to flow through us, even if we haven't had. I think that's where we get to integrate our life experience, so that they're not just fun and joy and suffering and bad things, but it's that when it all of a sudden it becomes a living spirit of truth that can come through us. Okay, let's begin. Let us begin. So I'm going to invite you to close your eyes. Hello, Melissa from Queensland. Yes, you are called to be here. Deepening communication skills as I share the sacredness I am, experiencing as a co-creator of a story making. Yes. So I invite you to close your eyes and to place your feet on the earth. And I said the earth, but you probably know it as floor. And to take this moment to connect with the earth that lives in the floor, that is holding you and your feet on this moment, on this day, in this way. My floor is made of wood, so I want to invite you to consider the origin of your floor, the origin of its story. If I were to imagine mine, I would consider a tree. a tree with roots to the very core of this earth, with leaves that spread out wide to capture the sun and the rain. And it knows how to receive, and it knows how to give. And even past the point of its own experience and expression of life, it still lives as it's changing form. So what part of earth that is changing form is holding you right now? Can you feel connected to it? Can you connect yourself to that? And as we connect ourselves to this, it's this idea of this greater connection that we're feeling to ourselves, to our time, to what it is to be a storyteller, and to have the stories of this time run through us. So as we gather in for this next bit of time together, I invite you to really consider this idea of what brings you here, what is calling you here, what are you wanting to deepen into and expand and express? And what are the boundaries? What are the barriers? What are the things that are showing up that are in your way? And if it's fear, you're not alone. How do you show up to face it? What do you need? And if it's the lack of time, you're not alone. How do you escape that story that there isn't enough? And as you sit here and just listen for a few moments about what are your stories, about what's between you and this radical, wild, great expression of life, of how life is wanting to be expressed through you, then I invite us into a certain kind of way of being together today, as if just our mere presence of waking and making time to meet this moment could begin to dissolve those things that are in the way. So I'm going to ask you another question. What are you in service to? What are you in service to? If you could create anything, what would it be? More love? More kindness? More gardens? What are you in service to? A friend of mine was over for dinner last night, and she told us her story of how she nearly died of COVID. She knew something was terribly wrong. She went into her closet to put on clean underwear, because you never want to go to the hospital unless you have clean underwear. And while she was there, her body froze and she couldn't move. And she laid in her closet deep into the night and into the morning with her eyes open, fully conscious and awake, and unable to move. And she said there was something there with her, guiding her through the night, inviting her to review her life. And the one thing that it did is ask her one question over and over and over again. And it asked her, did you love? Did you love? I'm going to bring you a reading, and I don't usually do this, but it just feels so right for the moment. I usually bring you other people's words at the top of our time, but today I'm going to read you something that was actually inspired by someone who saw something I was sending to all of you, and they said, oh, please don't send that, that's going to trigger them. And what I love about those people that bump up against us and create agitation and whatever it is that oftentimes I find the biggest, juiciest learning and expression, like when someone really kind of bumps up against you, you know. I don't really like being bumped up against, you know, because it kind of bothers me. But when you get really strong, the more people bump up against you, it can be like a good wrestle, you know. It's like when you're strong, wrestling can be super fun, right? So you got to be strong so the wrestle can be fun. So I was feeling particularly strong on this day, and this really, really did something to me. And it put me into a conversation about how important it is, or how meaningful it can be to understand our role as storytellers, and how, well, I'll let the piece speak for itself. I was asked not to trigger you. I was asked not to trigger your feelings or your thoughts or your memories about your relationships, to your mother, to your children, to your weight, to your sexuality, to your parents, to your life. And I would like to make note for the record that as a sacred storyteller, it's not my job to protect you from yourself, or your choices, or how life has or hasn't given you the dignity, respect, and kindness that you deserve. It's not my job to speak for you, but rather to wake the sleeping dragons living in the places that aren't speaking yet for themselves. And to be a sacred storyteller, it is to grab your staff and guide your listeners, or co-creators more accurately, as Melissa knows, over the mountain passes and into the depths and to the light of the fire within the inner temples of the mind, heart, and soul. So those who are listening, or more accurately co-creating with you, don't have to wander alone any longer. As a sacred storyteller, you provide a place where those who are listening can face those demons hiding in the dark, can examine fear rather than run from it, can excavate the corners and reclaim the threads of a long lost love, or of innocence and belief that life may have trampled upon. And then weave those threads back into the great tapestry of life. So if I trigger you, let's pray. Because I'm Jewish, surrounded by stories that tell me it's dangerous to exist. And I'm a woman surrounded by stories that tell me it's unlikely I will not go through this life unattacked. And I'm single, surrounded by stories that tell me that this status determines my value, or lack thereof. And I'm a woman who hasn't created children, living in a world surrounded by stories that tell me that this defines my worth. And if I were to ignore these stories because they scratch and claw away at what comfort this life has to offer, I might accidentally fall into those stories and find myself playing a role in them as if they are true, and fall out of the love that this world has offered me just as I am, and forget the practice of reweaving the stories of our time. Then we wouldn't be here together, sipping our words together, wondering about fate, destiny, and sovereignty, digging into the fabric of life from which we are woven. No, we wouldn't do that if I was to busy myself with protecting you from the beauty and travesty and mess of life. Instead, we would sit quietly, gagging on the concept of safety, while the words not spoken stifled a life not lived. So, allow me to trigger courage in each other, and bravery and love and generosity and healing and wonder as you wander into the places where you are and aren't living. Someone took this over the weekend on Facebook and she rewrote it. And she rewrote their own places where that was her story. So in that section where it said, "Let us pray, for I am Jewish and I am a woman and I am single," she wrote her own version of the stories that might stifle the existence of her life. And I thought that was such a fun way of being in the collaboration. I was so inspired by it actually that I wanted to invite you to take a moment to, whoops, it says let's pray, but it says let's pray, to take a moment to discover where are the stories that are living outside of you in your world that are kind of clawing away at the true expression of what you are, or could lead you down into a myth of what might have been true at a different time but doesn't have to continue to stay true. Am I being clear? Do you understand a little bit? I'm seeing some nods. I like to be just vague enough with my instructions so that you can have your own creativity, but give you just enough, guidance to get you going. So in this case, I picked my religion because there's a lot going on with anti-Semitism right now. It's pretty raw and real right now. I talked about what it is to be a woman. So I looked at, wow, there's so many violent images coming at me from the movies, from the television. Can I expect to go through life unattacked? What it is, what are the coercive messages about being single or being without child? You have these in other ways. You might have the same list, or you might have your own in terms of your employment or your role in your family, or the way that you are in your relationships, So I want to invite you just to take a moment to take a minute and explore, and this isn't just for women. We've got Brian here, to explore what are the stories that society has told you. And if you feel bold and you want to share just a line, and I invite you just to use this model because it's simple, I am this, one line, surrounded by stories that tell me this.
Hi, this is Nog. I will thank you for this class and this opportunity. Some stories that I've heard is I am a model minority and am expected to achieve the American dream. I am a woman and therefore am expected to be both beautiful and thin and attractive. Yeah, those are some.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. You know how dangerous that first story that you just told. I have a very dear friend from China who, she's a second generation, and her sister committed suicide. A lot had to do with that first story that you shared about the expectation of what it is to, as you said, be a model minority. Did you say that word? Did I just say that correctly? I don't want to miss.
Yeah.
Anyone else want to take a play at this? And as we each speak them, we just kind of inspire other people to be like, oh yeah, that story's living around me too. Huh. Yes. Elizabeth. Elizabeth?
One is I am not enough and I am too much. So that creates this overachievement and then a holding back of light or holding back of shine or holding back in relationships. So there's this push pull and then so not an equilibrium.
Yeah. And isn't that like there's that wild piece of where there's this desire for the wild feminine to show up. We want that sexy, hot, feminine, feral expression. because wow, isn't that kind of exciting to come close to that Eros? But oh wait, she's a little not in full, she's not controllable. Oh, wait a second. She's not, predictable, and she's probably not going to make the dinner, so maybe we don't want that actual expression, and right, as like fully embodied women, it's like that all the archetypes live through. How do we find that balance, and how do we find the place where each expression can find its alchemy, its place where it can live, in its way, in the way that is right for us, not just what society or others are desiring from us in that moment based on what other things. Let's do one more, and then we're gonna back our way into like, what is a story? We just dove deep in today. Look,
I'm not supposed to be, as born American, half Jewish, a woman who looks white, but brown inside. Sorry about my voice here. I'm not supposed to adapt another culture and way of life as a white woman. I'm not supposed to choose a brown man. And all of that means, and the danger included.
Yeah. So, wow, I heard so much supposed. What are we supposed to do? How are we supposed to relate to each other? How are we supposed to show up, right? And then it comes down to, where did all of these ideas come from? That's what I want to spend some time diving into today. So I want to start with I think a lot of you guys have been at these past webinars. How many people have been to one of these webinars before? I think we have we've got a strong standing. Okay. So I think that's part of why I was inspired to do something wildly different with you today. But I will do some of the basics, which is that, and Kat's saying that I've been taught that I have a tendency to take up too much space. Right. You aren't the only person that says that. It's so funny. I'm going to riff on something. I recently gained a bunch of weight over COVID, and there was a part of me that was like, oh, this feels kind of good. It was kind of really. I was like, there was a part of me. I'm like, oh no, I should lose all the weight. And I'm supposed to look a certain way and I'll feel this way and blah blah. And no, it's really true. It's like I like being really fit, but there was something about this whole idea of taking up space, and I started to understand what that was, and that all of a sudden, like, there was no argument about how much space I could take up or not. Like, my body just literally takes up a little bit more space, and I was like, it gave me a whole new concept and a whole new state to wonder about what we're doing when with our bodies, and how much space we take, and what shapes we allow them to come into. So, okay. So let's talk a little bit about stories and language and words and what we're all doing here. And so, one of the most oldest, the way I like to begin all these classes is, let's really just start at the beginning, and let's kind of get into, what do the ancient cultures, what tools, what hints, what codes have they left us to be able to make sense of all of time? And and what is language? What are words? Where do they emerge from? The one thing that we know is that words emerge from the land. The land speaks those words, and there are humans that once upon a time listened in such a deep way that they could catch the resonance from that place, right? So they caught the staccato, they caught the rhythm, they caught the resonance of the land that they were living on, and that came into the shape of language. And you can see how different places around the world have similar codings, similar lands. So when we pray on a certain piece of land, how humble can we be to listen to it and for its original language if we want it to understand us? I don't think it's that literal, but it's also like, let's not pretend that we can praise, a Nepalese prayer, in California, this happens a lot, and expect that land to be able to understand what we're saying to it. Of course, I think it can understand our intention, but there's something about learning the language of a land. So I'm going back to understanding, okay, so if we understand that these ancient religions and ancient cultures had an understanding of language, they gave us some hints to understand who, as we are as people, could continue to learn from this language throughout all of time. What are the universal lessons? The Hawaiians believe that words are so powerful that they can raise enough energy to speed the world up or to slow it down. So start thinking about this race to save the planet. What are we doing with our language? What are we doing with our energy? If our body is a battery pack with all this energy, what are we doing when we start racing? How much more energy do we consume? How much do we waste? What if we could slow everything down with something as simple as our language? What is it to be in relationship with your life force power with something so simple as a word? Sicilians believe that words are so powerful that they can poke a hole in the universe. I always think about that when I am thinking about when the temperature starts to rise in me and I'm in a little heated discussion, and oh gosh, words poke holes in the universe. You can never take it back. You can't ever take anything back. You can do repair, but once it's been spoken, it stays there. There's actually a word in physics that speaks to how words linger in a place. I thought about that last summer when I was driving across the country and I was stopping in these pretty down, depressing truck stops. And I was like, oh, I can speak beauty here and it will stay here forever. What if we walked through the world knowing that we could plant seeds of beauty just with the resonance of our voice and that it would stay there forever? Australians say that the words from the past must be sung to the present in order for the future to exist. So there's this understanding that in order for the future to continue, our history must be present. We're going to be doing a story. I only teach one story class like this a year where we learn the old stories. It's called Cantador. It's coming up. I'm going to tell you about it at the end of this class because I couldn't do a full storytelling curriculum without giving courtesy to this process of going back to these old stories and saying, who do we want to give our life force to? Who wants to live among us? There's a word in Japanese that is kotodama, and it's a Japanese term, and it means word spirit, and it speaks to the original divine spirit of a word before it enters the thought waves. So kotodama means that words are alive and they have the power to create even before they've been spoken. You think about that, and then when you were in a room with someone and you could feel the heat. They don't have to say anything. They don't have to move, but you can feel that something is up, right? Kotodama is in presence. The thoughts are in form, and you can feel them. Abracadabra, a world from the ancient Aromatic mysticism. I create as I speak. It's one of the oldest words on the planet. So when we're talking about language and words, it's like we're going back to this notion that all of the ancient religions agreed that the world was sung, spoken, and chanted into existence. The world was sung, spoken, and chanted into existence. So now, just with this really simple remembrance of this ancient wisdom, what is wisdom? But I just said this, the living spirit of truth, when we look at this and we understand humans' unique role on this planet, so this notion that people are bad for the planet, what a dangerous story. What a lie of a story. It's more of, do humans remember their unique role and responsibility as creators on this planet? With great power comes great responsibility. And as creators, through our language, through our words, through our thoughts, now we're getting into something. I'm from the East Coast, and I'm born critical. it just happens. It's like, I don't know, it's in the water, Northeast, and so it's like, we just, it's just, you look at something, you critique it, it's like, we're just not balled over by much, it's just not in our nature. And so I remember when I was starting to hear the West Coast, this whole like glass half full kind of notion. I was like, that's just horrible. Like fantasy, just ridiculous waste of time, you know, woo woo, wah wah, all that stuff. I was talking to my mom the other day. I was like, you know, Mom, I think I'm woo, but I'm not woo woo, you know. And she laughed and she was like, yeah, you're pretty woo woo. But anyway, but it's like this idea of that what I was thinking was super woo woo. And what are we saying by that? That it's out there. It's based in nothing except like fantasy. What's a fantasy? You know, we talk about this in one of our classes: dreams versus vision versus fantasy. You know, fantasies live out there. You know, oh, I want everything to be perfect and good and give me that glass half full. Sure, if it's a fantasy, but what if I'm speaking my dreams into presence? I speak from my heart when I speak about my dreams. You know, when I speak about my vision, I'm talking about my connection to life force. I am receiving a vision, and I'm going to really give it my heart energy and my grounded, you know, energy to this planet. I'm going to take action to bring it into material matter being. That's not a fantasy. That's not, I'm just going to be with my glass half full. But what are they speaking about, you know, when they talk about that all of the worlds, that the world was sung, spoken, enchanted into existence? And what is it to, as we look at this glass, and we're looking at this glass on this planet right now, some of us see it as half full. Okay, we see, wow, there's a lot of change going on here. There's a lot of change. And things are happening, and systems are being revealed as being incredibly dysfunctional, and things are breaking. But what's going to happen at the end of the chapter? If we're a storyteller, we know that the end of the chapter is the next beginning. That's what the next chapter is. And so some of us who are looking at this glass as half full are being like, well, you know, the water's, you know, it's not full, you know, but you know, and it might be going down, but we know that once the cup is emptied, we're going to have a cup to fill again. You know, and what kind of water do we want to place into that cup? Well, I would like clean oceans to place into that cup, and clean rivers to place into that cup. So I might as well take care of my oceans and my lakes and my water. You know, that's if I'm looking at that cup. And others of us are looking at the cup as half empty. You know, it's all going to hell in a bucket. And look at how bad and cruel we are to each other, and how awful everything is. And the sky is falling, and the fires are burning, and there's going to be nothing left. And that's true too. All of that's true. But it's only part of the story. Right? Because there's always going to be the next chapter. And so where do you, sacred storyteller, live in this chapter? And there's no faking it. There's no pretending to be where you are, where you aren't, and there's no wrong to be. There's no wrong place to be. You know, if there's anything I understand about the circle of life and how stories work, is that we're all on this great big wheel, and we all have different spokes in the wheel to play. And so it's how truthful can you be to the spoke in the wheel that you are. Some of us are going to call the alarm, and some of us are going to plant the seeds, and they're all needed. So this is what happens when a bunch of people that have been in the webinar before come around. I go not just off script. I'm into another universe of talking about story today. How one tells a story and how one lives a story, says Maria. Yes. So let's just get into this. What is a story? Let's just like simple, basic, you know, we're winding our way into all different kinds of ways of looking at it, but what is a story? Brian's asking the big question, but will there be humans left alive to listen to the story of the next chapter? You know, I don't know. Does it matter? I mean, it's like one of the beautiful things is we're talking about, you know, have you ever gotten to be around fall in New England and autumn? It's the most beautiful thing. Those trees, as they die, as they release, you know, what do? They're not actually dying. So let's take autumn as an amazing expression. Like perhaps we are living in the season of autumn as a planet right now. Let's just play with this idea. And so, because here we are, we're sacred storytellers, we can play. And this tree, this great wisdom being, knows that there's seasons, that there's some seasons when you come out, you party, and you throw out all the leaves, and you dance in the wind, and you got all the sun and the rain, and it's great. And then there's another time when you say, hey, you know what? The party's done, and I'm going to go hibernate. I'm going to bring all my energy in. It's going to be a little cold outside for a while, right? Listen to this. You know, this is happening in all different places, getting really cold. So what do we do when we get cold? We take our energy in, we bring in all the resources, we cut back everything that is unnecessary, okay? We go straight, we put all the energy straight to the core, okay? But what does the maple trees do in that moment of decision? They get beautiful. They are so beautiful. They red, orange, yellow, just mountains of beauty, you know? And so the question is, how do you transition? How do we change? How do we change form? You know, that could be one of the greater questions. How do we live in the season that we're in a way that we can have more dance and more love and more life? How can you live life to the very last second? If any of you have been around someone that's dying, have gotten to sit next to someone that's dying, it is an extraordinary process. Don't run away from it. It will give you your life back times 10. You know, the people who I've sat with while they were dying, they were living. Dying was a part of their living. And so, yeah, there's a lot that's dying in our time right now. And we don't necessarily have the skills or the rituals or the initiations to properly prepare us for such a thing. But there are people all around that are really trying to meet this moment. And so that's what gets me excited when I think about this time. You know, when I worked in the climate movement, and a little bit of my history is I produced and hosted the Green Channel for Al Gore's television network. And before that, I was a very, very, very active activist. And, you know, those were the best parties in the world to go to. You know, they were just the best because people were so alive. They were sitting there facing their fears. You know, this is a group of people that said, I'm really afraid of what's going on in the world. I'm going to activate that fear, channel it into action, do something with it so I can go to sleep at night, you know, and party like rock stars when I'm not, you know. And it's like, it sounds silly when I say that, but it's like there's something so alive in the vibrancy of meeting that moment so head on. Brief stories are important, says Elizabeth, and I agree. And right, so Thomas beaming in from Dallas, Texas, is talking about that film, The Day After Tomorrow, and it had a profound impact on people's thoughts about nuclear weapons. I'm writing a screenplay that I hope would have similar strong impact. Yeah, you know, and it's like, and what do we do when we start planting images of what's possible in the future? There's dangerously close to spell casting. What's a spell? You know, is when we talk about the future as if it's already happened. Okay, when we say things like the oceans will be empty in 2050, well, let's cancel that. You know, there's a possibility. That's very different than saying it's possible that if we continue at the rate that we're going, that we could actually do enough destruction where the oceans would not be as prolific as we now know them to be, and to be able to feed and nourish us. It's a possibility. If I say it's going to happen, all of a sudden, what role do I have to play in that story? Well, I better go get mine now because it's not going to be there in the future. You know, it creates a mentality of victimhood. I've got no power over this situation. Therefore, I must take power where I can get it. Victim is a very, very complex, amazing energy to come into relationship with. So it's like one of the things I got really curious about. So let's just talk about, okay, so when we talk about a story, what's a story? Who wants to pop in? Let's go laser fast on this. What's the story? Yes.
I think it's so many things. It's a becoming. It can be make believe. It can be mythology. It can be a dream seed. It can be, archetypal, something to grow into. It can be something of courage. It's usually a healing salve. It's an imagination awakener. It can be something that can give you a pathway to follow or to heal, or it can help make sense of the things that are all scattered that don't make sense. It can be a challenge or a comfort. It gives us some sustenance. It's a food. It can be a grace. I think it's much more powerful than most people realize. And for me, in my home, everything is imbued with story. And in my family, the inheritance really wasn't things, it was stories. And so that is like my legacy or my health, my value. And so I think, but it doesn't, our currency, our modern currency has not valued story like in other cultures or other currencies. But for me, it's very sustaining.
Great. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. There's so much that you said in that, that it's a temple, right? It's a place that we can go, and I always say it's a place where we can explore the deepest confines of our mind and our consciousness in privacy without judgment, right? So I've said a million things that I'm sure might have triggered a million different thoughts in all of you, but we don't think anything less of you or anything more of you because of it, because you had the privacy to explore your own what's going on in there. It takes us on a journey. It takes us somewhere. It can provide us comfort. It can nourish us. They can tend to us, right? There's living beings in them. Rosemary, what were you going to say?
Well, basically, Elizabeth said it all, but one of the things that made an impression in my family, that was our inheritance as well, were the stories. It helped to ground us and know where we were from, help us develop who we are, and help to set before us what our morals and values were, what we were striving for. Yeah. So very important.
Yeah, and that morals and values piece, right? It gives us our history, it gives us context, it tells us what we're connected to, it gives us our lineage. It tells us that, we have shoulders to stand upon, and that, right, those roots. And so what is it when we're a not storied race? We have to look at this. In the United States, we have a lot of people that are going unstoried. We've been completely disconnected from our roots. There's a thing about this. It's kind of amazing, and it's the both and. This is why I love storytelling. There's no right or wrong in sacred storytelling. Okay, there's space for all of it. So in one way, oh my God, what a horror to have this massive culture of immigration that has lost their connection to the roots. And what has been lost can't be found. There was a woman who came. Clearly, we were from the same place in Eastern Europe. I was selling a bed, and she came and she bought it, and we looked at each other and we're like, wow, we are from the same place. She had just come over. She had a very, very thick accent. And she said, do you know your family recipes? That was her first question. I had no concept of a family recipe. I don't even know. I can't even begin to imagine what was lost. But here's something else I know about gardening. And that when you garden, when you transplant a plant, the first thing you do is you pull off its roots. And you cut them, and you trim them, and you pull them apart. And then you put them in a bigger pot so that they can expand and grow larger. This is a very, very expansive time on the planet, especially when it comes to consciousness. So it's all happening at once, right? There's the horror. There's the horror that happens that comes from being ripped away from the roots of what you know. And then there comes the expansion that comes with being repotted and replanted in a place where you can expand in a way that you might never have been able to before. And it's like, here we are in the both and. So this idea about morals and values, I just want to go back to what Rosemary was saying. Yes, that's so there. And what I would also say is, I used to associate stories with operating systems. I would associate it with how humans often refer to themselves as latest technology. But I was cleaning the other day. I get so much good thinking done when I'm cleaning. And I was sweeping the floors the other day, and I was like, you know what? That is so wrong that I am making that metaphorical description of a story as an operating system. And there's some truth in it, right? Because, what do we call all of our television shows? Programming, right? It's all in the language. It's telling us what roles to expect from life. It's telling us our values. It's speaking about our possibility, but it's bigger than that. Stories are bigger than that, and they're the libraries of our soul. That's what stories are, even when they've been bastardized and shoved into some small little thing designed to make you want to consume it. Made into little cotton candy so you think that it'll taste good. But even so, there's still something in there that is it's a library of the soul. So when we look at, okay, if that's like kind of the basic structure of a story, now we're here talking about sacred storytelling. What's a sacred story? What defines that? What distinguishes it? Loke says, I was raised in an unstoried family, and it was what I hungered for and didn't know. And here I am sharing stories. And Loke has amazing stories to share, you guys. They're really quite nourishing. Okay, a sacred story speaks to wholeness, says Melissa, right? So there's something where you're feeling whole, feeling connected. It's what I feel in the wholeness expression. Yes, Maria, you're upside down for us. I don't know why, so I think your hand is up. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Yes, I have a little technical difficulty here today, but I was just thinking about stories as memory. And I mean, a memory and a sacred story is the remembering.
You know what, Maria? I'm so sorry. There's something that's...
So when we're sharing our story, it's like we're remembering through ages and through ancestors.
We caught little pieces of what you're saying. You froze, but we caught some of the audio. And one of the things I heard you say was that stories are memory, and that oops, there she goes. Okay, well, we heard what she said, and like in that, right? They're holding the stories, and that they're remembering. And you know, it's like I got to meet with oh gosh, I'm forgetting his name now. David. He wrote the King's Speech, and he calls himself a time traveler, you know, and he goes back to that time and he remembers, like he went back to that time and he listened deeply, and so he activated his imagination. He really placed himself in there, and I think that through that space we can remember what lives in the story, you know, in different parts of it. So and right, they're holding our memories, and they will say it's like, well, we need these old stories so that we don't have to repeat themselves. It's part of the evolutionary creative consciousness and evolution of humans. You know, it's like, why would I want to repeat your story when you learned all these things? Think about this in the Me Too movement. If we had more women that were telling their stories about the travesties and things that were not in aligned with their best thriving, or just common decency, then more women wouldn't have had to experience them, because they would have known what to look for, you know, or they would have been known, oh no, I can say no to that, you know. So, but that's changing with this generation, right? There's been a massive outcry in saying, no, you know, next generation of women, you will not experience the same level of something being considered acceptable. That's done, right? So I think about this in terms of how important it is to remember our old stories and to carry them forward, especially the hard ones, especially those well-earned ones. And this is where I feel like when we come into a wisdom story, it's a very specific kind of story that I like to teach in these classes, where we take these moments of life that were really hard and really challenging and had a lot of pain and suffering in them, and rather than just think of that thing as, God, oh my God, I never want to go back there ever again, you know, to be like, oh, this was an initiation of life. Okay, we're recontextualizing it, we're reframing it, we're saying, okay, this was an initiation. I was initiated by life, and I lived in another culture. There might have been ritual, there might have been elders around me, there might have been preparation, I might have been held, and you know, sure as heck I would have come out and sat around the fire and told the story, because I'm not the same person on the other side of this, and I'll never tell the same, and I'll never be the same person that happened to. I've been changed by the experience. There's now something that is a part of my life that wasn't before, and it's calling out something in me. And when we have context, it can call out our courage, it can call out our bravery, it can call out tools and medicines that we never knew we had access to, you know. But if we don't have that context, then it can just be suffering for suffering's sake. It can be meaningless. It can kind of drive one crazy. You know, the cruelty of life can be a little bit unbearable. So this is one of the things I find really powerful about storytelling. And when we talk about a sacred story, now we're talking about, something that has, what do we mean by the word sacred? We're saying we're honoring the life in something. We're honoring the divinity in something. We're coming to it with reverence and respect, right? And so when we call a story sacred, what are we saying? We say, I see the life in you, and I bring reverence and respect to the life in you. So now what is it for me to tell a sacred story? It means that there is a story that's living through me, that's bigger than me. Sure, I could tell you about the time that I, was diagnosed with thyroid cancer. But if I'm telling you that story, it's not a story about me if I'm telling it as a sacred storyteller. There's a moment when that happens and I gather in my friends and I'm like, something really big and scary is going on. I might need a story ceremony. I need to tell you what's happening. I need to be witnessed. That's one thing. If I take the stage as sacred storyteller and I give you the story, I'm going to give you something, right? What am I doing? I'm giving you a gift. I'm telling you a story about you. It's come into the place of being a universal story. I've come into the role of stepping onto the path of elderhood. I've come onto the path of saying, hey, I've learned a thing or two. I'm going to throw some breadcrumbs behind me so you don't have to go through the same mines that I walked over, because I figured out how to get around a couple of them. Oh, and I got blown up by 3 or 4 and I want you to know where they live, So that's what we do as storytellers. That's what we do when we do these giveaways of talking about how we made it through, So and that's what we do when we gather with intention and focus around really mining those stories for those gems, for their gifts. And it puts us in a state of not being a victim to life, but having a role to play in this life and being part of something, and having that sense of belonging, connection. So that is a little bit about, what is a story? What is a sacred story? What are we doing here? Normally, I go through a little bit more of a linear path and I tell you guys who I am and where I come from, and I talk about how I studied theater in New York City with a bunch of professionals and how I got a master's in social work and used to work with wilderness kids and did youth at risk and learned about group process and studied environmental education and went on to work with Al Gore and got really deep in the climate movement and did a whole crafting of a story about how I came to be here and the people who cultivated and called out my gifts along the way. And how when I came to this place of how, asking that question, what's my thread to weave into this great times? I'm a Capricorn. I don't know if any of you else are Capricorns. We are born with this thumb on our back that tells us we have to take care of the next 7 generations. I know more nonprofit organizations that are founded by Capricorns. We can't help it. So I had to ask that question, as many of us are, what's the thread that I'm here to weave into this time? What is that? And when I sat with that prayer, a huge story came through. A huge story came through. And in carrying the story, it taught me, I had all of the craft and knowledge and skill and technique that I'd learned about story, about group, about education, about climate, about activism. But story, when I prayed and the story arrived to me, it began to open the doors of a mystic life into the mysteries of how story, when you really understand story as a mystery school, it actually opens the doors and gives you the keys to practice the techniques of what it is to be a good human and what it is to be human. And it's not about doing and making the most amount of money and having the biggest cars and having the biggest house and doing all that. I was just hearing, what is it to be successful, but to actually live a joyful life? And to me, those keys of living a joyful life, it's all in how you carry your stories. That's it. That is one of the doorways. And so, in this great inquiry of how do we meet this moment? How do we heal the waters? How do we heal this great disruption between so many different kinds of people? How do we deal with the apocalypse? What is apocalypse? Great, study the language. What does it mean? It means, it's a Greek word. It means a lifting of the veils. It's Oz. We're just looking behind the great curtain of Oz and being like, oh, who's really there? Oh gosh, the racism, the sexism, the isms of our time, it's not like they just showed up in the last 4 years. They've been here. And now we've got the skill and the consciousness capacity to face it Yes, wow, what if it's not like we're living apocalyptic times, but like, yes, we're here. Okay, game on. Right, says Elizabeth. Yeah. We made it. Now what are we going to do with it? Now what are we going to leave behind? What wisdom stories will we create that will be teaching stories and warning stories and medicine stories for this next generation and for the next generation after that and for the next generation of that, so that they never have to come to this place ever again, because we know how hard this is and that there's no getting out of it. Perhaps our stories will be the only things that get out alive, Brian. So that's what calls me to be with all of you. That's what calls me to this work. And it's really about, how do we show up in these times? How do we bring our greatest self? How do we do it with joy and with singing and with dancing and with fun and with play? Yeah, Elizabeth is rocking out, In one of the last classes, we had Roxanne. Roxanne was amazing. She would sing at the end, she would lead us through song at the end of every class. And now, because of Roxanne and her bold way of expressing the joy and the gifts that come through her, we're going to be moving to a group called Mighty Networks. And we're getting off of Facebook. We're heading over to Mighty Networks, where we can have a system that really has reverence and respect for how do we carry stories of these times, and how do we do this deep wondering and deep work. And Roxanne will be leading a song circle there, which I'm so excited for. So that was, a wild dance today with you guys through a very unlinear expression of storytelling. But I think I opened the door to show you what's in this realm of the School for Sacred Storytelling. And I'm going to, if you feel complete, we're at the end of our hour, and I will say, I bid you adieu. And if you're saying, whoa, wait, the School for Sacred Storytelling, how do I play? How do I get in there? What role will I play? How do I create? Where's my magic golden pen? Then I'm going to stay on for about 10 more minutes, and I will talk to you about what's coming and take any questions. So that's where we're headed. And thank you for being here. And so here's what's coming down the pike. We've got this School for Sacred Storytelling, and it's tools for the evolution. I like that, right? And it's like, because we are in this evolutionary time on the planet. And so this is a time when we are going to really double down and say, how do we bring more joy, more peace, more grace, more play, more happiness, more connection, while facing exactly what's going on in the world head on? So how do we make fear our sacred ally, by and let it lead us down the path of courage and bravery and more dancing. So have a good day, Kat. So the school is it's called the School for Sacred Storytelling. The theme of this year is Speak Your Spark and Leave Your Legacy, a legacy of stories. That's going to be our theme for the year, And over the arch of this whole year, you will have an opportunity to go through every single chakra of your body. Okay, so where are the stories living inside of you? And we start, you have to excuse me, I have to close my window only because the garbage truck is here and it's really loud. So hold on. Thank you, good men. So you have this opportunity to go through this year, and what you'll do is at the end you'll have your legacy stories. These are the stories that you want to make sure you leave behind, and the way that we get to them is we go through each chakra. Okay, and so we begin with what I call the Critter Matrix. This is a sanctuary course. And I will leave you a link just so that you can see the pretty thing right now, because it's really kind of beautiful. Worked with a beautiful designer on this who lives on Salt Spring Island. She was like, how do we bring beauty to the expression of beauty that we're going to be experiencing together? And I'm actually just gonna even do a little share the screen and show you the page, walk you through it. So this is pretty much like the introductory. This will lay the foundation for the year. The way that the program is designed is that you can see it's coming into the temple of belonging, right? What is that? I love that, the temple. And really understanding story as as a sanctuary. And what we're doing at the cornerstone of all these courses is we're looking at where does change happen and how does change happen. And so to understand how to come into that creative life force connection, how do we come into our stories, how do we change a story? Well, we do that through very basic and simple, oldest technology in the world of ritual, prayer, and ceremony. So that's actually part of our storytelling experience, is getting to have this relationship with the earth, with the land that you live on. And as that is part of the process of getting to know your stories and getting to learn how to communicate and share your stories. So the way that we're going to do that is we're going to activate your creator matrix. Now, I'm going to tell you a little secret because I'm right here with you guys, and you're going to say, when that term creator matrix first came, because this next program, it actually, a lot of the design of it came straight through dreams. And my friends were like, don't use the word creator matrix. People are just going to think about Keanu Reeves. And I was like, but it came through a dream. I was like, I can't deny the title of this because Keanu Reeves had a sexy black outfit. I don't know. It's like, this is what it is. And so, but when I went back to the etymology and I said, okay, let's look at matrix. What is it? What is this word? It actually goes back to the word ma, mother, creator of all things. And that is exactly what we're doing. We're going to look at your creator operating system. We want to understand how you work. And so the very first course is designed to really help you understand how your system works. And so we do it through this program where we're going to go on a hunt for your psychic silence. Okay, so, and what I call a psychic silence is this space that's between you and that creative life force. Some people go meditating. I say, let's not meditate. Let's go clean our rooms. Seriously, that's literally like, let's clear out the space. Elizabeth said everything in her home has a story to it, right? How you relate to matter matters, you know, and it's all carrying energy and it's all influencing, affecting what you're able to hear and listen to and what stories you're carrying. So one of the things that we do to understand what makes you tick, how you work as a creator, is we go through a physical exercise where you get to actually see in a somatic, lived, embodied way your strengths as a creator and your challenges as a creator. So when I, did this and I cleared out one of my spaces and I engaged all the technology of clearing and cleansing and purifying and all the things, praying to the space, understanding how can I have this office become a temple of my creation? How can I honor the life and spirit of it? How do we do all these things? How do I engage the ritual? But there was also, I got to see where are my strengths as a creative? Like I can start a project like nobody's business, but where are my challenges? Where are my blocks? Where are my boundaries? And there's no you can't hide from yourself when you make the practice of creation physical. You can ironically hide from yourself a little bit when you're writing because it's a very non-physical expression. But when you have physical things and how you're seeing how you are in project management, are you a starter? Are you someone that needs a lot of structure? Do you need a lot of help? Do you need a daily ritual? Do you need a daily schedule? Do you need someone else in there to help you do the thing? Are you that person that's going to skimp the corners? Or are you going to go crazy OCD and spend 2 weeks working on every single corner? So it teaches what I realized about myself in that like 10-day exercise. Like I got to see some blind spots that I hadn't seen about myself in 10 years of being a professional creator. And it was very humbling. And I thought, I don't want to keep this to myself. I was like, as frustrated as it was, I was like, oh my God, this is an amazing technique to help people really understand how their systems work. So you also, with this first course, you also get it's the Creator's Guide to Psychic Silence. And it's a guidebook that will lead you through this 6-part process of unleashing your creative life force. It is so much fun. So you might say, that's it. That's all I got. That's all I want. I just want that one class. And that could be your way. But what I'll say is this is how the program works. So the program works in 10-week modules. So along with this course, you'll have exposure to me. We'll meet for 6 live classes in a row. You also get live classes with other teachers. So these are 5 other teachers that are going to expand your consideration and thought process and skill around the craft of creating. You'll receive this guidebook. You'll also get your group of greatness. And this is a group that you will carry with you perhaps through this entire school year, year, or just through this course. And these are the people that really help you be accountable. And these are the people that really witness your journey and really hold you through it. Then you also have a private group. And as part of this class, you actually get to have your very own a free membership to our Mighty Networks. It's going to be a 1 month long free membership. And this is where you can really dive in and get in there even more in terms of sharing and reflecting and getting to see and encourage each other and get through each other's blocks and have a lot of fun in that space. You also get recordings to all the classes. So if you can't come live, and coming live is the best. I'm just going to say it right now. It's the best. It's the most fun. It's where all the goodness happens. But there are people like, like some of us who are in very different time zones, and we can't always come live. And so there are recordings, and you can come that way. And when you get that group that you meet with outside of class, you guys can choose the right time for you to meet. So that happens. What you're seeing here is that I used to run this course where people would sign up for the entire thing, and then some people would drop out because they just got tired, and I realized that this wasn't sustainable, and this is all about learning how to be sustainable in these times, right? So what I remodeled the entire program. So now we do these basically 10-week programs. And so we come in, we go into that, one of the chakras, we discover like, what are the stories that are in there? Like when we go into the second chakra, we'll be dealing with intimacy, relationships. What are our stories around sex and sexuality, and we'll dive in there and we'll find what's there, and we'll use this creative process, and it'll be really fun. And we'll have these other teachers that are also going to push our edges and invite us to find where our comfort zones around where are we in our stories. And then we'll come out, we'll have a 2-week break, so important. We get these 2-week breaks throughout the entire time, 2-week and 3-week breaks, and then we'll come back to tell the story. And that's when we have a specific class that's developed on your story skills and your skills of, embodiment of that story. Someone wanted to know more about, like, how do I embody my stories past just memorizing? How do I feel confident in my expression of my stories? Where does all that happen? And so we do that in those story skills classes. The one thing that we do have that's coming up right away is called Cantadora. Okay, so this class starts next week, August 2nd is when this class begins. And this is a class that is, this could be, because the school year is about to begin, this could be, so for some people it's going to be their last class of the last year, and for other people it's going to be the first class of the new year. And this is what I love about this program, is that it's designed to go on a wheel. You can come in at any time. I will say, coming in and getting to have Creator Matrix at the beginning, it's good. Like, it's just good. It's how the program's designed. You will have a step above, in terms of really understanding who you are as a creator and what your blocks are and where your strengths are, and then you can amplify all that. So it really is a great start. But Cantadora starts in 2 weeks, and this is where you get to learn how to carry an old story. This is where and one of the truest things I understand about storytelling is that someone can go out there and they can give you the 6 bullet points about how to tell a story and how to do the hero's journey and climax and blah, 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 blah. But it doesn't mean that it's going to have life in it. It could be a clone of a story. We are victims. Oh gosh, I'm not going to say we're victims, but we're prey. There's a lot of clone stories out there right now, where they figured out that the human technology likes to go on this ride, but that doesn't have life in it. You don't feel connected. You don't feel in community. You don't feel more alive in yourself. That's that sacred story. That's the story that holds the life in it. And when you know enough of the old stories, and you start to feel a rhythm in the soul of all these stories, then you start recognizing that soul when it comes to you. And the stories, it becomes very easy. It becomes so easy. It becomes so easy that you don't need someone there to tell you how to tell a story. You don't need that kind of manual. What this program is really focused on is getting you to the point where you come into your relationship with your creative life force. What is your specific technique? What is your specific voice? What is your specific style? And I'll tell you, I just witnessed Kariana as someone who went through the entire year's worth of course, and I just saw her land her style, her specific technique. Loke saw that, right, in that last class. Woo! She's really worked for it. She's really experimented. She came in with a certain thing, and now she is in her resonance. She's in her truth. It's so compelling to listen and watch and receive her stories. And she's opened into this space of being so relaxed and being able to have so much play with what she's doing. It's been a joy to watch her evolve through the course of the year. So what I would say is that in terms of the year-long, so in terms of what's coming next, if you're like, I'm ready, I want to dive in, you can go straight into Cantadora. We begin in 2 weeks. You're going to get to receive the experience of what it is to carry an old story. So you're going to go, and your first job is going to be go find an old story. Go find an old legend, or go find some old folklore. Find a story that's from your lineage or from the land that you're living on, or a story that you've always been curious about. And you're going to learn it not to change it, but to actually give it the courtesy of learning it and meeting it for who it is. We're going to go into other places throughout the year, and we're going to change all different kinds of stories. But for this class, it's really about getting to have that skill and that technique of learning an old story, studying it, knowing where it comes from, knowing the ethics involved with carrying an old story. This is big right now. How do you be responsive and respectful, when you're carrying a story from another lineage or from another time that you've never been part of? How do you do that in a good way? So we're gonna take on all of that. Then we're gonna take a bit of a break, and then September we launch into the next year's program with the Creator Matrix. So the way that the rest of the program works is you have these 6-week modules where you go in deep dive, then you have a 2-week break, then you come out with the story skills classes. The 6-week modules include Eros, dealing with that second chakra, Shine, dealing with our power, our core purpose, Unity, dealing with our heart, connection to self, connection to other, connection to land, connection to community, Speak Your Spark, all about this, the 6th chakra. We're talking about social justice now. We're talking about meeting the moment. We're talking about, living in the truth of what you are and how that wants to be experienced. So your, divine life force and your unique expression. There's no right way to do it. It's your way when you're so alive in your own alignment. And along the way, we learn very specific techniques for different kinds of stories. Wisdom stories. This is that story that we talked about earlier. Take a moment of a rough spot and turn it into a gift, into a giveaway. Medicine stories. This is a story for you. This is your story. You're going through a really challenging time with something, and you need a way to access your creative life force to bring healing and make meaning of something. So this is actually a private story. Vision stories. This is really fun. We just came out of that. That was so much fun. And we were planting seeds for the future, and learning a very specific technique of how to do this in groups of people, so you can lead other people through the process of creating a vision and listening for the vision for the world they most want to live in, and finding a pathway and a bridge to get there. This is my favorite thing to do when you get around with a bunch of people and they're getting really down on the earth, and you're like, hey, you want to co-create a vision story? It's a party trick, and all of a sudden they're in their imagination and they're playing, and you're all enjoying, and you're laughing, and you're like, oh my God, I had no idea, And so you have these real tangible techniques. Teaching stories is another one. So these are the stories that we don't have a lot of them. This is almost a lost art form, these teaching stories. But this is about, how to make sure that these hard-earned lessons, that no one has to repeat them, and so they're warning stories, I think that's it. I think those are the 5 modalities. So that's the program. What's happening is that it officially launches at the end of September, but we're in the process. We're booking over 30 guest teachers. These are amazing people from around the world that are going to just bring all this expansive time and opportunity to your consideration of this. And because of that, and we're not like, all the pretty pages aren't up on the website yet. If you want to come in now, you will get your reading list. You'll receive 33 prompts to heal the world. Isn't that hilarious? First it said, I want to be 33 creative prompts to change the world. And I was like, I don't know about that. But it's to heal the world, like I can handle that one. So you'll get a creative prompt once a day for 33 days to get your creative juices flowing. You'll receive a reading list, and you'll also receive instant access to our Master Teacher Library. This will keep you busy till September. It's 3 years worth of classes from our guest Master Teachers from over the course of the last couple of years. So you will just be like well steeped and nourished and ready for your creation process. And for those who come in at and this is like the crazy early bird schedule, you come in at last year's tuition rates. So last year tuition rates, it's going up this year because, you know, I'm a storyteller. And I've been learning how to run a business. And when I looked at the numbers, at what it was to bring in all those guest speakers and what was left, I was like, oh God, I actually have to like start running this school like it can stay alive. So I had to raise the tuition prices this year. But if you're like, I know that this is my program and I don't need the fancy pages and I don't need it all to look perfect, you get to come in and register at last year's prices. So you can register for the entire course and you would receive $1,000 off. It's that early bird special. Or if you say, you know what, I just want shine. I want my Power and Purpose course. That's it. You can register for that course and get $100 off. So that is how that early bird special works. And as I said, when you register now, you don't have to wait. You can get right in there and get that goodie basket. That was a lot of talking. Is there any questions that you have? Register through email info@leahlam.com and we will send you all the information on how to register. Any other questions, thoughts? Great. Maria, it's really funny. You are upside down. But it looks great. Okay. Well then, I look forward to seeing you soon. If Cantadora is your thing, I will give you the Cantadora. I'll give you that because that you can register for our website on that, and it's coming right up. And if you know you want to do this, I would say like register today and start looking for your story because you'll have an opportunity to learn 2 old stories. And the first old story that you learn is a creation myth. And so that's the first one that you want to go for, one of the original origin stories. Okay. With that, I bid you adieu. Have a wonderful day. Everyone can take themselves off mute. If you just came on and you were coming on to learn about next year's program, you're more than welcome to stay a little bit longer. But for all those that got all the goods, you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Much. Best wishes.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. You're welcome. You're welcome.